Major support for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Well, just as quickly as it came, summer vacation has now rapidly faded into the almost past. It's hard to let go of the more laissez-faire lifestyle that we enjoy here in the summer in the Carolinas, and we certainly hope that your summer is and was relaxing and recharging. Welcome back to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy, seen every week in every market in North and South Carolina. On this back-to-school edition, if you will, reading, writing, and arithmetic rise again to dominance. And for us, arithmetic is really the part. Later, our guest is the Tar Heel State's chief numbers cruncher and financial gatekeeper, Treasurer Dale Folwell. We will start in just a moment.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. Please visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com.
On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Brian Etheridge of Leadership North Carolina, Alan Smith, Spartanburg Area Chamber of Commerce, and special guest Dale R. Folwell, North Carolina State Treasurer.
Guys, welcome to our program. Happy summer. Good to see you. It's not too late to say that, right?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
We'll hang on to summer as long as we can.
Absolutely.
Let's start with this idea of not just the tragedy in Charlottesville, but there was a South Carolina lawmaker, Alan, I'm looking at you because he's from Pickens County, Gary Clary, he's in the South Carolina House, and he was quoted recently saying that the tragedy in Charlottesville kind of ripped the scab off for him of what happened down at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston 2 years ago now. So, Brian, this idea that we're redefining the legacy of the Confederate, not the Confederacy, but the Confederate influence on what Old South and New South mean, from a leadership standpoint, how do we balance that and have a compassion, but a progressive dialogue on not just ripping down statues, but going through this in an orderly process to heal, but also to place what is appropriate here?
I think it's a great question. I think from a leadership standpoint, Chris, I think what has to happen is it all starts with, folks of goodwill sitting down and having conversation. And when I say having conversation, it's not necessarily one side getting their point across, but it's really coming at it from a posture of looking to understand what the other side's view is. Because at the end of the day, for many of us in the South, history is very personal. And, that ties back to families, but, taking a holistic look at how that history impacted all of us, not just one certain segment, is really important. One of the things we, kind of live by at Leadership North Carolina is this idea of sharing ideas over a cup of coffee, and that importance of people being willing to listen and understand and gain understanding from others. And I think that's a lesson that we can apply to situations like this, as difficult and tragic and as painful as it happens to be. I think a lot of those conversations need to be had.
And Alan, this is not going to be lost on you. Governor Haley at the time was instrumental in following what happened in Charleston, of course, but taking the Confederate flag finally off the grounds of the State House and doing it in an orderly way. It was passionate dialogue. There were some tender and raw nerves, but it seemed to be a healing process in South Carolina's history. So again, same question. I mean, how do you define this legacy of what the Confederacy meant to the New South?
What happened in our society so many years ago, not too many years ago when you think about it, was so egregious. And it's going to take a very, very long time for us to reconcile. And we've got to be, as Brian mentioned, we've got to be very honest and open. We've got to create a dialogue and not be afraid to talk about the issues. There are still people in our society that are suffering from what happened in the 50s and what happened in the 60s. We've got to do things to economically include them. I mean, we are both members of the business community. We always talk about in Spartanburg that our work doesn't matter. Our work of prosperity, building prosperity, doesn't matter if we don't bring everyone up as we improve and as we grow as a community.
Okay, guys, let me stop you there and let me ask you about the science of listening and the science of communicating. I'm sure it's not lost. Brian, I mean, you talked about that, but I mean, really, how do you do that? How do you listen to someone? How do you not completely discount and think about what you're going to say? But I mean, how do you go forward constructively?
Well, two things about that. One is at Leadership North Carolina, we really talk about acknowledging what your biases are going into a conversation and how important it is to recognize those biases, but kind of check them at the door a little bit, if you will, of just hearing what somebody else is saying and doing a good job of asking probing questions so that you truly understand where somebody's coming from. That's so critically important, of really understanding where somebody's vantage point is, where they're seeing that history from.
And Alan, same thing in Spartanburg County. I mean, there's a lot of proud Southern heritage there. How do you get people that have been intractable about, and not necessarily about Confederate monuments, but in any way, how do you let go of old stereotypes and old ideas to really be open-minded?
We all, as Brian mentioned, we have to acknowledge our blind spots, and we have to realize that everyone can bring something to the table, everyone. And if we're not open to that, we're never going to grow. We're never going to move forward. I mean, we need a diversity of thought. We need a diversity of ideas. And as long as we acknowledge that everybody can contribute, everybody can bring something to the dialogue of moving our respective communities forward, I think we'll be better for it.
Let me come to something, because we're going to bring our guest on here in just a second. Brian, in North Carolina, Governor Cooper has been at odds with the General Assembly in many ways, not in every way, but in quite a bit through lawsuits. And my question is this: it's not indicting the governor in North Carolina or the General Assembly, but how do you build consensus and how do you build leadership and movement forward when you are always debating power?
Well, and that's a particular challenge we're facing in North Carolina right now. I think the longer term view of that, of how we move forward as a state with that particular challenge, I think you can look back over North Carolina's history of how you get through that. And what I mean by that, Chris, is really in a lot of cases, the governor's opportunity is really to cast a vision for where our state can go. And while there may be challenges of who has the power right now, the governor has a tremendous opportunity to speak directly to the citizens of the state and cast that vision. And that's not, overweighting the General Assembly or the governor's office, but I think there's a tremendous opportunity there to really cast that vision and show the citizens of North Carolina where we could go. And how they can engage as citizens to help us achieve that particular vision.
Well, and I hope it's right for the Tar Heel State. I hope it moves that direction. In the Palmetto State, Alan, not too long in the past, 2 or 3 weeks ago, SCANA and Santee Cooper, the public-owned utility in South Carolina, announced that they were going to shutter any additional investment and not move forward with building the nuclear power projects that they had. About $9 billion now in billion dollars invested in that. But then Henry McMaster and the State House both stepped up and said, well, wait a minute, not so fast. So what happens now? What happens to SCANA? What happens to Santee Cooper? Will they build the nukes? Will the state end up selling Santee Cooper to some other party like Duke or Dominion Resources or Southern Company? What do you think happens now forward?
Well, you're asking for a silver bullet answer. I will tell you this, though, and we mentioned power in the previous question. There's a battle royale going on right now, and Governor McMaster has made it very clear that he wants to hold hearings. He wants to figure out what happened, why it happened. He has said he wants to hold those responsible and accountable for making these decisions. So it's a bit premature to say what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. I will say that it's just a bad situation all the way around. And so again, it's a bit premature to predict where this is headed.
Well, battle royale is probably a good quote. I might have to use that, but thank you guys. We're going to bring our guest on in just a moment. Coming up on our program very soon, his name is Marcus Smith, the CEO of Charlotte Motor Speedway. Why that's important? Certainly the NASCAR business, but also Marcus was the point of the spear and the one leading the effort to bring Major League Soccer at least to the Charlotte region. That was also a bit in opposition to what Raleigh was trying to put together. But we'll talk to Marcus Smith about that. And also, Carolina Business Review goes on the road and ends up producing 2 special programs at the South Carolina Ports Authority in Mount Pleasant, just north of Charleston. Coming up on that program, transportation and infrastructure, among other guests. Jim Newsom, the CEO of the Ports Authority, along with Christy Hall, who's DOT Secretary, and others who will be announced very soon. We hope you watch for those 2 very special programs. For a whole lot of reasons, the Office of the State Treasurer is a very critical office. It is where public policy adopted by the General Assembly and local governments is implemented in many ways. It is, in essence, the state's bank where debits and credits are settled. The Treasurer is also fully responsible for the issuance of monitoring of all public debt and bonds. It is where public employee pension and health care is managed, and it supplies guidance, oversight of cities, towns, and counties' fiscal operations. Just a few things. Joining us again is North Carolina State Treasurer Dale Folwell. Your Honor, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you have a lot of energy, but thanks for joining us again, sir. You know, I want to start with this idea. Is swirling in the media for a while now has been the idea, nationally, has been the idea about this unfunded liability. Mm-hmm. And it means what states will have to pay retirees, mm-hmm. state employee retirees, but also their health care. Mm-hmm. If you total that up for North Carolina, and I'm saying this for the benefit of our viewers, is closing in on $50 billion. It's plus $42 billion. Mm-hmm. This is a big number, is it not? And how do you approach whittling away at that?
Well, the way we approach it is like eating a ham biscuit. It's one bite at a time. And, you know, $50 billion is broken up, $42 billion for the unfunded health care liability. And this is where people have been eligible for lifetime health care as state employees for the rest of their lives. But unlike what Charlotte did 30 years ago, Mecklenburg County did years ago, no money was ever set aside for that obligation for these people to be eligible for health care. The pension liability comes from the fact that even though North Carolina has one of the best funded pension plans in the United States, the pension liability comes from the fact that we're assuming and have assumed that we're going to earn a rate of return of 7.25%. We have not achieved that on average this century. So when interest rates were 8 and 9%, it was real easy to achieve 7.25%. But now with interest rates being below 1% in so many instances, earning 7.25% rate of return is completely unrealistic. So what we're doing now is we're communicating with the people of this state and the leaders of this state about these unfunded liabilities, and we're working with stakeholders about how we're actually going to solve these problems. Going back to the word optimism a moment ago, I'm optimistic that with the strength of North Carolina's balance sheet right now, its rainy day fund, mm-hmm. the growth in our state and jobs, that we have a real opportunity maybe to be one of the only states that's able to solve this issue of the next 10 years.
Are you encouraged that you're going to be able to address this in the near term, or is this going to be a 10 or 20 year effort by the state?
I'm encouraged that we're going to start signing our contracts and not other people's.
Tell me what that means.
Well, what that means is in my 7 months as the state treasurer, I have found too many instances of where we have signed other people's contracts and not them sign ours. Mm-hmm. So we're not really good at writing contracts and we're not good at enforcing them. And we're starting to do that in the treasurer's office. So what it really means is that I paid out in the last 30 days, we paid out $800 million out of the treasurer's office in pension, health care, prescription drug, and other types of benefits. $800 million in 30 days. So you can imagine there's a lot of room when you talk about mm-hmm. that amount of money. In addition to the fact we're managing $110 billion in total, the 26th largest pool of public money in the world, and 5 times larger than 1 year's state budget. So what I'm saying about the contracts is that we're finding so many instances of where we've signed other people's contracts, we're going to start signing ours. So that's the first step. And the second step is to make sure money is not leaving these plans to people who aren't entitled to them. We're in the middle of an enrollment audit right now for our state health plan. There hasn't been a living, breathing enrollment audit done ever. There was one done in 2011, but none of the documents were archived so that we wouldn't have to go back to the employees and ask them for all this information again. So, you know, Governor Martin, who you're very familiar with, always says doing right's rarely wrong. And what we're trying to do is to figure out what's right, get it right, and keep it right on behalf of the participants of these plans and the taxpayers.
Brian?
You know, Treasurer Folwell, one of the names that you know comes to the fore in North Carolina when you talk about leadership, when you talk about you know, the state's fiduciary, and I'm dating myself a little bit by saying this, is former State Treasurer Harlan Boyles, and you know, well regarded, you know, defender of the public purse, so to speak, a great fiduciary, wonderful public servant. I wanted you, if you will, to share a little bit about, you know, that connection, but certainly your personal leadership style of how you've approached your tasks, your challenges in the office of State Treasurer.
Well, Chris would agree with me. It's hard to date yourself when you have no gray hair. So let's start with that one. But to go to your point, I was honored just 48 hours ago to have accepted on behalf of Harlan Boyles with his son, Harlan Boyles Jr. Harlan was just inducted to the National Hall of Fame posthumously for his work as State Treasurer. And for your listeners, you started the show talking about history. It's important to know that Harlan Boyles was considered the best State Treasurer of the 20th century in the entire United States. And he was the keeper of the public purse. So we take what this book says and every word in that title very, very seriously. We have a loyalty to the participants of these plans and a duty of care to make sure that we're executing these contracts and managing this money correctly on behalf of participants and citizens. But the other part of Harlan, because I sit at his desk every day, I wear his lapel pin every day, is to understand that there's a lot that can be learned from people by just standing on their shoulders. And I stand on Harlan Boyles' shoulders every day.
So you're channeling Harlan Boyles to some degree in the office?
Is that a Charlotte term?
Go ahead, Alan.
Well, first of all, Mr. Treasurer, I am so glad that you have your job and I have mine. You know full well of the issue we're grappling with in South Carolina, $20 billion pension liability, unfunded liability. The legislature took action during the last session. Employers, 13% are having to pay. Employees, 8% plus FICA. This is actually causing some municipalities to have to lay off people, lay off teachers, so on and so forth.
Directly attributable to this pension liability?
Yes, sir. So for far too long, we were paying too much in fees and getting too little in return. You know, I got a real tough question before, so I'm going to give you one. How do we avoid that situation moving forward?
Well, great question, and I have a fantastic relationship with Curtis Loftus, who's the treasurer of South Carolina, and all the treasurers, you know, share common practices. The South Carolina situation is not unique to actually other states in the country, but I tend to answer your question with the term the price of promises. And when I got to the treasurer's office in January, the number one motto was we're going to reduce complexity and build value in everything we do. Pennies, paper clips, cutting fees, reduce complexity, and build value. When the treasurer, from the time Harlan Boyles was the treasurer, Brian, he was paying $50 million in fees to manage our pension plan of $60 billion. Last year was $612 billion in fees, $612 million in fees. So our fee situation is every bit as worse as it was in South Carolina, maybe even worse. So what we're doing is we're reducing fees. We've reduced fees by $65 million already in the first 6 months. That'll give us a 4-year run rate of almost $250 million in fee reductions. And all that money belongs to the participants of the plan. The second part of your question is that a new word that we're now introducing in the Treasurer's office, Chris, is sustainability. how do we sustain this? How do we put the state pension plan, preserve and strengthen it, and the state health plan in a situation where the people who are closest to the health of our citizens, the troopers, the teachers, the DOT workers, all the state employees, where they don't have to worry about this when they leave the house every day. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to figure out how to sustain this for the long term. But it's very difficult when fees have gone from 50 to 600 million, when we're paying out 500 million every 30 days just in pension benefits, that life expectancies have expanded, and that interest rates have hit our historical lows. We got a lot of work to do. And but you just, as I said earlier, Teddy Roosevelt, I think, said, you know, we're doing with what we have with where we are, and that's exactly what we're doing at the Treasurer's Office.
So these things that are kind of looming on the horizon, maybe not on the horizon, but in fact, so you've got a pension liability, you've got a healthcare liability. Are you going to have to cut some current benefits? That's the first question. The second question is, $600 billion in fees on $100 billion or so is 6%, right?
0.6.
0.6%.
Yeah.
That's even that is a pretty fat amount. But I'm sorry. So I'm looking at all these different things. I think the first question, most important, though, Mr. Treasurer, is this idea that anyone who's receiving benefit now, will they have to do with less at some point?
No. But you know, the poet T.S. Eliot, you don't expect this from a motorcycle guy to be quoting T.S. Eliot, but you know, he said, hell is where nothing connects. And this is not hell. All this stuff connects, and it connects back to the AAA bond ratings and how much we borrow for money and all the above. So let me just give you like a 3-week recap. We just reported $10 billion of earnings in the pension plan for the last fiscal year. Now, and the fees have gone down. We just reaffirmed our AAA bond rating, and we refinanced over $1 billion worth of bonds. Now, in order to give us the AAA bond rating, they had to look at the solvency of our pension plan and our health plan. That's how all this stuff connects. People don't wake up and think about the AAA bond rating every morning. But I can tell you that when we saved over $120 million in interest by refinancing these bonds, that's more roads, more classrooms, and more criminal justice and other the core functions of state government. So, but the other thing we're trying to do is we're trying to take advantage of our largeness. We are the 26th largest pool of public money in the world. We are the largest purchaser of health care in the world. The amount of money I'm going to spend on health care this year for state employees and retirees exceeds the appropriation to the entire university system of North Carolina this year. This is very significant, and it's not because I'm the current treasurer. This is not emotional, and it's not political. This is mathematical. This is really happening, and it's really happening right now. But I'm optimistic, even though the state health plan deficit is 3 times larger than my pension shortfall, I'm more optimistic about solving that one than I am the pension one, even though it's 3 times larger.
Yeah. We have about 2 minutes left, Brian.
Treasurer Folwell, wanted to kind of follow up on Christopher's question, and you know, for folks in North Carolina and across the Southeast, you know, having a AAA bond rating's huge. I think maybe your average citizen may not be as aware of what a huge impact that is. So kudos to you and your team for the work that's being done to maintain that bond rating. Moving over to the state health plan, you know, talking about that public trust of, you know, that commitment made to those state employees and retirees. Tell me a little bit about what those retirees, those current employees can kind of expect over the next couple of years as it relates to the state health plan. Kind of following up on Chris's question of just some of the challenges y'all are facing.
Well, thank you. In the first 6 months, this is what has actually happened for next year. We have froze family premiums. We have froze employee and children premiums. And even in light of an almost 25% premium increase associated with something called the health insurance fee that's intertwined in Obamacare somehow, even in light of the fact that I was going to be faced with a 25% premium increase for our Medicare Advantage retirees, we froze those premiums for next year also by renegotiating that with the health insurance company that's doing it. So we're taking advantage of our largeness, and we're signing our contracts and not other people's. So the direct answer to your question is certainty. For next year, now there is a small premium that's being placed on individual employees for the first time. But next year, families and individual employees with children and Medicare retirees will not see a premium increase for 2018, which I think is a Herculean effort. I appreciate the applause about all the stuff we're doing, but the fact is the credit goes to the 380 people that work in the Treasurer's office and the taxpayers of this state. Those are the ones that allow us to go to Standard & Poor's rating, Fitch's and Moody's.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are out of time, so once again, we'll have you back. But thank you for making time for us.
Thank you.
Good to see you again. Alan, welcome. Brian, good to see you.
Thank you.
Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, Barings, Grant Thornton, Novant Health, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.